What's up, cooks? Welcome to the Card Kitchen. I am the Card Chef, and today we are cooking up some new deck ideas for Celestial Gardens. Yes, I know we haven't even got to see the whole set yet, but I can't help myself. I've been cooking in the kitchen for these new decks, and the first one is a 17 trainer stage 2 deck with Charizard, and it's the new Charizard. Now, actually, the one Charizard in this photo, unfortunately, is the old one. I must have clicked on the wrong one, but it's for the new Charizard, the Stoke version, the one we got in Shine and Revelry. So the shiny Charizard, who for 1 energy gets to attach 3 fire energy from the energy zone to the Charizard. So the way this would work is you're only playing 1 Charmander and 2 Charizard. So the whole idea is you automatically start with Charmander, and because you're only playing 1, you now don't have to play Pokeballs, so you can fill your deck with other things. So if you're able to get the cards you want early on and evolve quickly into Charizard with your rare candy, you can stoke instantly, which means by your second attack, you are now attacking for 150 damage consistently every single turn. So this might be a very cool idea. In fact, I think 17 trainer decks might become a thing. Maybe not a super duper thing, but as we know, 18 trainer decks already exist. So if we can build a stage 2 17 trainer deck and it actually works, I think it would be pretty cool. In fact, I think Meowscarada would probably work best in that sense, because Sprigatito, if you're playing 1 Sprigatito and 2 Meowscarada, just like this deck here, basically what you're doing is you're automatically searching for Meowscarada because your Sprigatito gets to search for a random grass type Pokemon in your deck, and if the only Pokemon it can search is Meowscarada, it will automatically get it, which means if you already have rare candy in your hand, that means on the next turn, as long as you don't get Marsed, of course, you can evolve into Meowscarada and then attach its second energy and start attacking for 130 damage if it is an EX Pokemon. But for this deck, let's get into the rest of the breakdown. Of course, we're going to be playing 2 Rare Candy, and then we're also going to be playing 2 Ionos. Of course, you're not going to play Communications, because you're never going to have a time where you play Communication, because the only other 2 Pokemon that you'll ever have in your hand are Charizard. So if you have one, you're obviously not going to Communications for the other. Now, you can put a second Charmander and a Communications in your deck to try to increase the chance of getting your Charizard. That is an option too. However, I chose to just put 2 Iono. And then, of course, out of all the new cards, not just Rare Candy, we're playing 2 Lily, because what Lily does is heal 60 damage from your stage 2 Pokemon. And that's what we really want to rely on. We want to be able to rely on making sure that we can keep our Pokemon alive as often as possible, just in case. So we're playing 2 Pokemon Center Lady and 2 potions, and I also thought that maybe we can play some capes, but it's really hard to find the space because we do also want to potentially play a Rocky Helmet instead, because we're really only going to ever have a chance to play 1 tool card, because we're only really playing 1 Pokemon. You'll never have 2 Charizard on the field. So you do want to only be playing 1 tool card in a build like this. And I chose Rocky Helmet to make sure that with 150, if I do need to find a breakpoint, I do find it easier with a Rocky Helmet and potentially a red. So we're also playing 2 reds. But of course, you can play a cape instead to make sure that if you don't get your evolution right away, your Charmander stays online. And then once you get to your Charizard, you can start healing a little bit with Pokemon Center Lady, Lily, and potions. That's an idea as well, considering you are playing 2 red. And then we're playing 2 Sabrina. I don't think you'll ever have to play a Cyrus in a deck that outputs so much damage, like 150 plus potentially 170 with a red, or 190 because of an attack with a passive damage from your Rocky Helmet. So I don't think you need to play Cyrus, but 2 Sabrina definitely does feel good, because you might just want to be able to do 1 knockout, and then if you know you can't get the knockout, you do a Sabrina, knock out something else, take a shot, and then Sabrina again for something that you know you will knock out. But let's get into the next deck. So this is the next deck, and it's a Gengar EX deck. So I think Gengar EX will finally have its time to shine, considering if you can skip Haunter and evolve it a turn earlier, that means you have a turn earlier of locking your opponent out of playing supporters. And we went with the full-on lockdown kind of synergy, and we are playing it alongside Aerodactyl. Now, we're most likely only going to be playing Psychic Energy, so you'll probably never be attacking with Aerodactyl, but basically what you're doing is you're saying, I'm not going to let you evolve or play supporter cards. Now, of course, Aerodactyl will only stop the active from being able to evolve, but we are playing one Mars and one red card to also increase our chances of stopping them from being able to evolve. And not only that, but because you lock them out of playing supporters, Gengar traditionally, at least for me, has always worked super well with cards like Red Card and Mars because their hands get so large because they never get to play the amount of supporters that they have in the deck. And a lot of decks sometimes play a lot of supporters. They play a Cyrus, a Sabrina, two Professor's Research, sometimes their own Mars or a Team Rocket Grunt, an Iono, whatever it may be. So their hands can get very bulky, and if they can't evolve, that means their evolutions are staying in their hand. And if they haven't got their basics in order to evolve on the bench, and because they have all evolutions in their hand, their hands get even bigger. So now you bring their like 6-7 hand card hand down to 3 or even less if you've already lost a Pokemon and you played Mars. So this is full on lockdown. And then we're playing an Iono and a Communication, as well as 2 Rare Candy to really increase the chances of us getting into that Gengar as quickly as possible. We are still playing one Haunter because Haunter, you might not get it, so you still need the regular consistency that you might have. And then we're only playing one Pokeball because we automatically start with Ghastly because we're playing Aerodactyl. And we will search the second one with our Pokeball, of course, playing the 2 Old Amber for Aerodactyl, and then 2 Professor's Research and 1 Sabrina, 1 Cyrus, obviously 1 Mars and Red Card as well, like we said. So this would be a pretty cool idea. There might be a way as well to fit in something like a Giratina and a Dawn in order to potentially play a both Psychic and fight in to make sure you can attack with your Aerodactyl, so that if you can get some additional Psychic energy on your Giratina, you can either attack with that or move some or one of them to your Gengar so it could start attacking as well. But that's like a future build or a future idea. But anyways, let's get into the next cook. So the next deck we want to look at, and the cook I made, is Magnezone, Giratina, and Alolan Marowak. So I've already built a very similar deck like this, where we have 3 Pokemon that can ramp out energy onto themselves like crazy. Originally, it was Giratina, Magnezone, and a Leafeon. In this case, I actually kind of like this version better because what you're doing is you're replacing the Leafeon with the Marowak, or the Alolan Marowak, I should say. And the reason why I think it's better is because 1, you can ramp onto Giratina by itself. 2, you can ramp onto Magneton for itself and then eventually evolve into Magnezone, which means you have 2 Pokemon ramping onto themselves. And then on the turn where you don't feel like you need to ramp onto Giratina to end your turn, you can play Kiawe to ramp 2 fire energy onto your Alolan Marowak, giving it 2 fire energy, and its 3rd energy requirement is Colorless, which means you can play Psychic energies in this deck so that you can manually attach to Giratina the turn you want to use Kiawe to ramp the 2 fire energy onto your Alolan Marowak. And the reason why I think this one's a little bit better than the Leafeon build, even though I really like the Leafeon build, the Leafeon being able to ramp onto itself, Magneton and Giratina doing the same thing, as well as playing Psychic Energy, so you can also attach additional energies to Giratina once you want to start attacking with your Leafeon. But the reason why I like this version a little bit better is because you have both Alolan Marowak and Magnezone who are single prize Pokemon, which means you can utilize these two at the beginning of the game to try and get some early game prizes, at least enough so that you only need to finally finish off a Pokemon in the end, which means your opponent has to go through both an Alolan Marowak, a Magnezone, and a Giratina. Obviously, Alolan Marowak and Magnezone being first, so they don't get the two prizes at once for knocking out a Giratina, whereas you might only need to get 2 Pokemon down to get 3 prizes. So this is very similar. It would work similar in the sense of how Gyarados decks work. What they do is often, if they lose a Manaphy first, is they'll bring out the Palkia first, even if Gyarados is loaded up. If they know they can't sweep the game with Gyarados, is they'll bring out the Palkia and try to get a prize with that, or at least enough damage so that they know once Gyarados comes out, it can get 2 knockouts in a row, getting them 3 prizes by knocking out 2 Pokemon, whereas they've had to try and knock out 3 Pokemon, the Manaphy, the Palkia, Origin Form Palkia, and the Gyarados. So this would be a very cool and interesting cook. Of course, there's a lot of combo pieces and a lot of end in turns, so there will be times where you have to wait to really attack, because you're going to be able to end your turn with Giratina as well as Kiawe, which also means you can't play Giratina's ability and Kiawe in the same turn. But the rest of the deck is pretty standard. It's just 1 Sabrina, 1 Cyrus, 2 Professor's Research, and 2 Pokeball. Basically the 6 most standard trainer cards that you'll ever play in any given deck. But anyways, that is it for this cook. Let's get into the next one. This is the next cook, and it's a ramp colorless splash deck. Basically, you're playing Alolan Raichu and Yanmega in the same deck because they both require 3 energies to attack, but they're both requirements are 3 colorless energy, which means you can ramp onto them with something like Dialga. Now, you might also want to do this with Manaphy instead and then play something like Lilies in the deck so that you can heal your Alolan Raichu and or Yanmega. But the cool thing about this deck, regardless if you ramp with Dialga or Manaphy, is that not only do both of them get to attack without having to play anything else other than Metal Energy, but you're also covering a ton of different type weaknesses. So basically, your Yanmega will be able to hit Darkrai for weakness, which is really good because if you get a Rocky Helmet ping or you play red, even with a cape on a Darkrai, you will automatically knock it out. And then not only that, but Alolan Raichu, similar to Gallade, can just absolutely sweep games regardless of the type weakness that it's hidden for. But in case it doesn't hit for weakness, or it doesn't sweep a Pokemon that has a lot of HP, something like a Gyarados and a Blastoise, it will at least hit for weakness, definitely getting the knockout. So you get to hit Darkrai for weakness at this deck and Gyarados, which obviously, as you know, are pretty much the top 2 decks in the current format. And if they continue to be good in the next format, this deck could absolutely counter 2 of the best meta decks in the game. Now, an issue with this deck is of course going to be consistency. We are only playing 1 communication and 2 different stage 2 evolution lines, so it might be hard to get into those ones you want, but you do have time because you do have to put 2 energy on Dialga before you start to ramp. But once you do, you get to ramp on 1 Yanmega and then 1 Alolan Raichu, and then just manually attach to either or, and then you can either try and put a leaf in the deck to get Dialga out, which you probably should, or what you should do is you should just retreat for the 2 energy from Dialga and then start taking Pokemon out with your other 2 guys. And another thing too is you can, like, if whatever matchup you're in, you can focus on your Yanmega first if you're playing Darkrai, or you can focus on your Lone Raichu first if you're up against a Blastoise or Gyarados. And then the rest of the deck, we have a Sabrina Cyrus split, a cape and helmet split, as well as a red. So now we get to put extra HP on one of our Pokemon to avoid being knocked out with the cape, and a Rocky Helmet on another one, potentially something like a Dialga since it's going to sit in the front, so we can get that passive damage, and then a red to just really finish off and make sure we have that final touch and that final breakpoint that we need. And then 1 communication, as I said. You can also put a leaf in here. You should probably put at least one leaf actually with a Dialga in the front like that. But if you're playing a Manaphy, then you don't need the leaf. But if you're also playing Manaphy, you might want to try and play a something like a Lily or two, which means you would start to lose deck space. So maybe Manaphy is better, but still better without the Lily regardless. But anyways, let's get into the next cook. So the next cook we have is Solgaleo and Victreebel. And yes, I finally said Solgaleo correctly. I had to Google it on how to pronounce it, but it's Solgaleo. And so anyways, this deck I've talked about a couple of times in different videos, but I think this is pretty much what it would look like. It might have to go through some edits and testing, of course, like all the decks that we reviewed today. But I think this deck has a really cool combo in it, and it's with Victreebel and Solgaleo together. So basically what you want to do is start with your Victreebel in the active spot, force out a basic Pokemon, bring in your Solgaleo with its ability for free into the active spot, and then knock it out. Then on the next turn, you retreat with Leaf, bring your Victreebel back in, bring out another basic Pokemon, bring Solgaleo back in with its ability and knock it out again, and then rinse repeat one more time with Leaf and Victreebel, bringing in your Solgaleo for the third time and knocking out another basic Pokemon. Now Solgaleo only does 120 damage, so you are going to want to play things like Red and Rocky Helmet in this deck. Now how many specifically? I chose a 1/1 of each in order to have a kind of split, and then because I wanted to make sure I had room, of course, for 2 rare candy, because we're not playing any of the stage 1s. Now we might need to find room for the stage 1s, which means we'd have to remove something else, so it might be harder to fit things into this deck than you would think, which is why, again, I think playing 2 stage 2s in a deck is still going to be very hard, even with Rocky Helmet, because you just don't have the space to do it. And then obviously 1 Iono and 1 Communication to increase the consistency with those rare candies to get into those stage 2s as quickly as possible. Now another idea for Victreebel, because I do think Victreebel is going to be very good, is you can actually just play Victreebel in a deck where you want to be playing things like Grass Energy, which means you just play it with either any other grass Pokemon, or you play it with another Pokemon you don't mind not attacking with. I thought about potentially Aerodactyl. So Aerodactyl EX we already saw in the Gengar version that I made, but I think it would work very well with Victreebel as well, because not only would you be able to stop your opponent from evolving into their active spot, but that also means that every Pokemon that comes in can't evolve, which means there's going to be a high chance that all the Pokemon you're bringing in are basic Pokemon. So you can build a deck around that too, because not only are you stopping them from evolving, but now you're bringing out their weaker, less HP basics in order to knock them out. So I think that would be a pretty cool idea too, but again, all these decks would have to be tested and to find out if they're actually any good or not, and we also don't know what other cards we're going to get, so this is all just for fun, theory crafting some cooks to figure out what cool things we can do going forward in the new meta. But anyways, with that being said, thank you so much for tuning in. Leave a comment in the comment section below, like, subscribe, and share, and as always, keep cooking.